Hi, Jeff. I should have comment. I think it was Monica. You made this comment about International Mother Tongue Day and how English is easier to learn in other languages, and then how English has conquered the rest of the language, is dominating, conquering the rest of the world as a language that is dominating. I just want to make a couple of comments about that, just from the background of having that. English is easy to learn because it's a post-Creole language. Okay, so it doesn't have um, English doesn't have the linguistic traits of a lot of other languages that have had a long history of linguistic complexity. Um, English has benefited a lot from being exported to other countries, and that's where there's other countries like English, Anglo-Saxon Jew that happened, started in England, then got exported to a lot of different places, especially through the United States, and the whole movement to the New World and all that. And that's where the language then exploded because the whole melting pot concept of the American culture and all the other immigrants that came in, they all kind of stopped learning their using the language to all kind of melting pot thing, and adapted up to that new country, which was the American dream kind of thing, which I don't believe, but they all believed it. Everybody believed it and struggled through that. But that's what made it easy. And then because of the First and Second World War, and when the United States finally got involved in military expansion and military police in the international world, that's how the language has become. The military enterprises helped that too. Um, but the language is simple because it's dropped a lot of the complexity. I don't want to say it's simple. It's simple in its own ways, but it's simple to learn really quickly, really fast, because it doesn't have the linguistic complexity of many of the European languages. Uh, doesn't have any clicks, doesn't have any tones, so it has that other languages have, like in African and Asian languages. It doesn't have the complexity of it's not Finnish. It doesn't have 16 different declensions, or even 5 or 3. It uses um, it has a low morphology. That is its syntax is the word of words. Morphology is the actual parts of words. So its morphology is very simple. Um, you know, dog, dogs, cat, cats. It's very simple. Simple, singular and plural is really simple, and the morphology that's on the nouns for declension, and that's the plural nouns. And you can think of it doesn't have all the declensions on top of that to add. Say, is it from the dog, to the dog, with the dog, of the dog, belong to the dog? All that kind of stuff. Those are called case systems. So somebody calls it declensions in some languages, but it's basically semantic cases. So it doesn't have all that doesn't have all that baggage that causes complexity to have to learn everything. It doesn't have a complex verb conjugation system either. So it's kind of repetitive, and so it's really you have to have the pronoun, the personal pronoun to say, is it I, you, singular you, plural you, we, he, she. You've got to have that to be able to understand English. Or if you don't have that, you're dead. But the other languages, like Spanish, which has all the verb conjugation complexity, you don't need the pronoun because you just know it by the fact that you've got using the right word of the right conjugated verb, right, with the tense, the aspect, and the mood. I'm not going to go into all of those things. Tense, aspect, and mood. Tense, mood, aspect is called TMA. So the tense, mood, and aspect are also parts that add to the linguistic complexity that each word has its meaning in a place. So you remove all of this things I've been talking about of tense mood aspect of the verb conjugations. So conjugations of verbs are really, really complex in many of the languages. You remove from that all the declensions, plurals, and all that, the complexity of all the language, agglutinative languages, which are both the verbs and the nouns. You remove all that agglutinative stuff of all these little pieces of the words, meaning have big parts. You have to add on. And you have to master all this. You have to be the Jedi. You have to be the linguistic Jedi to be able to be able to manipulate and use all these different things. That's what makes all these other languages seem complex. Plus the tones and the clicks and whatever. English doesn't have all that stuff. Plus the English is a language. Music is used a lot to promote English, so it just works. So it's a very simple language for that. Now, it gets tough when you realize that over time there aren't a lot of rules you have to learn. So, and you can approximate and people accept it. If you approximate, people accept it and they'll do it. The problem gets into play when you have to learn all those specific words and feeling good in spelling and stuff and spelling bees. It's tough, okay? Because you got to memorize every little thing, every little difficult thing. Every little thing you have to memorize all these exceptional rules all over the place. Because there aren't any rule books to tell you how to do it. So people that are growing up in the language, have learned that. And add to it all of the add to it another complexity is the noun verb. Well, it's pretty much the noun and adjective. No, noun, verb, and adjectives. So record and record. I'm recording. I'm going to record this record. Okay, it's two different accents in the sense in the word. The accent, the part of the accent where it happened, the emphasized part of the word is actually different depending on which word it is, depending on the part of speech that it is. Right? That's tough. Now, you don't see it in the writing, but you hear it in the speech. You hear it in the vocal, in the language. But by writing, so everybody can really get good at writing because you don't have to worry about all this stuff. Okay, so it's a simplified language on all the other things. Plus, you only get the complexity of it in the spoken part, but you don't get it. So if you don't speak it, if you're not speaking, if you're only writing it, you're okay. So that all makes what seems to be, but when you start speaking it, you have to do it. That's what makes it tough. And the relations part, the speech to the text part is what gets tough. And still, if you pronounce it with, if you say it wrong, people aren't going to make fun of you. So you can't, if someone said, I record, I got to think of this backwards because I can't say it down how to do it backwards. I'm not used to it. So I record, I want to record this. I want to record this record. Okay. I want to record this record. I got to think of this backwards to make myself do it. It's really hard to do. I want to record this thing. I want to record this record. No one's going to make fun of you, okay? Because you got the idea across. In other language, they're going to sit there and mock you and make fun of you and stuff. And they can do this all the time because you didn't get that exact little tense mode and aspect of that single verb conjugation right. And they're going to make fun of you. And that's why all these other languages are hard, because then you're being critiqued and made fun of. And that's why they have negative reputation, being, why people learn it. That's what, add to it. The fact that French, you only pronounce, you only pronounce 1/3, 2/3, 1/3 or 2 of the letters you actually, no, you only pronounce about 1/3 to 1/3 to 1/2 of the letters you actually write. Okay, that makes it really tough to learn to speak. Whereas English, you don't have that. Now, the problem in English, you do have the history, the whole socio-historical part of the great vowel shift that it actually moved all the vowels 1/4 of a turn right. And so they all so that they're all 1/4 of a turn right from what all the European languages are. So that's why that's why you have these differences between the languages. Like if you know the European Romance or Latin-based languages, you just got to switch it's like you got to turn the language. If in the order of the vowels are in the system, A, E, I, O, U, you just want to turn it 1/4 of a turn, and then you get English. Okay, that came from the Great Vowel Shift in the Middle Ages. So there's a bit of that too. uh, kind of in the mix. And I was thinking about so all these socio-historical things that actually make it, and that people have been, because it was a highly immigrant, I don't know what they call it, emigrantized and immigrantized. I'm going to invent a word. Hey, I can do this. This is another thing in English. You can invent things and people don't make fun of you. So I'm going to immigrantize this, or I'm going to emigrantize it. Hey, hey, that makes sense. Yeah, we'll have a new word. I've coined a new word. You do this in other languages. Believe me, in my master's thesis, I did this, and I was like fighting with my jury, my thesis committee to actually accept that I invented a word in French. And actually, in the footnotes, I said why I chose this ending of the word rather than the other ending of the word, because it sounded better. I actually had to say this in my thesis to actually invent a word in French. That's nuts. Well, that's how you have to do it for French to be able to be accepted by the French Academy, right? So, to get it actually in the list. But hey, in English, it's do what you want. Hey, to communicate the message, because that's the background. Communicate English for all the immigrantized systems, situations. Communication is what prevails. Communication is what prevails. It doesn't matter if you get the pronunciation wrong. It was also a melting pot. Communication prevails. It's just none of these other languages that are established for so long. They're in this rut of you got to do it right, got to do it right, got to be detailed. Whereas French, English is that communication prevails, and now what's happening? The internet's happening because communication is prevailing. It's not about the details, not about the exactness or exactitude, or what do you want to use the word of that one? Being precise doesn't matter. It's that you get the message across, and that's why it's done well. Okay. The second half of your point was that it's conquered the world, and I want to cite one of my favorite professors in linguistics. Okay, his name is Gilbert Puech. Gilbert Puech, if I anglicize it a little bit. He's a phonology professor of African languages. Phonology professor specialized in African language at the University of Lyon, Lyon 2 and Lyon, France, where I did my master's and my doctoral studies. And I studied metrical phonology under him and other things of phonology. But he was a professor. He was a professor there, and then he actually became president of the university. So he's a linguist that became a president of the university. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So he's actually asked me, handle the business aspects and not just the things. But he had studied did his PhD in the United States. So that kind of probably helped. He saw how that benefited and all that. And he would give us all these books about metrical phonology and everything in English in the French University. And then all the students that came from the countries to learn linguistics in French would sit there and complain because he give books in English. He says, hey, he says, you don't want me to give you the stuff written in French because it's you can't even understand it. He says, I'm going to give you the stuff in English because they can understand it because they know how to communicate in English about metrical phonology and that things. But he said one day, because the students kept complaining about this, what I would do is I would go and do seminars in French about the English book written in metrical phonology to the other students because I wanted them to understand so they could actually pass their exam at the end of the year. I was doing that. I didn't tell the teacher, didn't tell him. I'm telling him now just because 30 years later, because I think it's, he didn't know that I was doing this. but that's why I knew, that's why I was able to pass the exam like a star. It just did really well because I'd learned it so well that I was actually communicating in French to all the French-speaking students. So I had to really explain it well, and I was doing the test on the PhD students because we were doing phonology. They were kind of correcting my stuff and say, "How did you get that right?" And twist, tweak it, and then do it again. And I did. I got really well, but I learned how to communicate this stuff that was pretty tough to understand to start with. But he said one day, I remember him saying this. One day in the class, and he said, all of you are, complaining about it being written in English. And he said that 3,000 years ago, or 2,000 plus years ago, 2,500 years ago, it was Greek. Greek was the language that he had to speak across the world at that time. And he said 2,000 years ago was Latin. You had to speak and write Latin 2,000 years ago across that whole Roman Empire. And then he said, 300, 400 years ago was 500 years of Spanish, maybe then German, They said that French. And he said, today it's English. This is the vernacular. This is the lingua franca today. That all these have always been lingua franca. So I've even pluralized it. I pronounce it like franca and franca. You can feel the pluralism. I'm adopting the words and adapting them. But he said, but the problem is that will be the future for your children. It'll be Japanese, and believe me, that will be really hard. Okay, that's what he said. He just shocked everybody. It was great. It was great. His statement, he said that was actually came out in Scientific American, if I remember. About 2 years later, I saw it in Scientific American in the French translated version of it. Oh, I said to my father-in-law who read this, he said, they've got a thing about linguistics, because my father-in-law was actually correcting my doctoral thesis. So it's about 2 years later, he found this statement in Scientific American. He really liked scientific books and stuff. And I said, that's my professor. And I read this and I said, I remember the day he said that in class. I remember the day, well, probably one of the classes he said it because it's probably seen all the time. But I just told you what he said, and there's some truth to it. That there will always be a lingua franca at the moment, depending on power, depending on people in power and all that, and that's just reality. And the whole thing is to leverage that power when you can, when you've got it. And right now it's English, but it probably won't be that in the future. But right now it is. That's what it is. So that's why it's easy, and it's caught on because of its simplicity on some things. But it becomes more complex later on. The verbs are tough. Okay, so take up, take down, take away. That's hard for people to get because what happens in their language, they have a single verb for all the different meanings, right? So it's complex in its own way because you can get it wrong. You can say it wrong, and it's good. You can say if you can say one of these things, these two-word verbs, you say it slightly wrong, people aren't going to make fun of you. I mean, they're going to kind of joke at you, but they say, "Oh, this is what it is actually in English. That's what it is." But actually, in the other language, it's a verb. It's a whole verb, and it's just a verb that has all the meaning into one word. But you got to know each one of those words in the dictionary to be able to, you got to be a walking dictionary. Whereas English, you can kind of mix and combine the words, and it's okay, and it's close enough. It's close enough. We're okay in approximation. I want to go to linguistic approximation. That actually works too. In English, that works really, really well. Whereas in other languages, it doesn't always work well because of the historicity of the language and the importance of the language to the culture and the chauvinism of the language, because that pride and stuff, which English has its own chauvinism. Okay, so we do have English chauvinism for English language too. But these are some of the things I just thought were kind of good to bring up based on your post, and just want to say these are kind of the why English is so easy to learn. It really isn't, but it depends on what level you want to get to and how far you want to get to. If you want to get by, it's fine. If you want to get by and just do it, it's fine. If you want to really master it when you're publishing and you're getting the right stuff, it's tougher. It's tougher. It really is. If you're reading it as an input language, like translation, reading as an input language, and then translating into other language, you're translating the complexity of the simplification. Okay, that's what I'm saying. The complexity of the simplification of English, you're translating into the complexity of the other languages. But the English's simplicity, or maybe it's the English simplicity of the complexity, the complication, or it's the English simplicity of the complexity. That's probably one I would say it that way. So English has a simplified complexity, right? So if you're translative, if you're using English as your source language, so you're dealing with it as an input language, you're actually you're just understanding the simplicity of the complexity in that language. But then you're translating it and actually producing the content, and you're producing the complexity aspects of it in other languages. That's easier, yeah, because you're reading it, that. But it's harder when you have to actually produce it as a foreign language, and write it, write articles in English and have them published and stuff. That's harder because then you get the red marks all over the place. And I've done it as actually a native speaker. I'll tell you, I came back when I was learning French for 1 year, and then went back to the States for a year, and I got slammed because of your writing sucks. And I was a really good student in high school, really good in high school and college, just top straight A's, and top dean's roll, honor list on honor societies, just no problem. Then I went and lived in France, and I wanted to learn French and really advance it. And I came back for after 1 year. It's like, oh, my master's, my teacher saying your English sucks, because I had been trying to do it the same thing in French, and so I came back, and then I did the same thing. I went back to France again for 3 years, and I met my master, my doctoral studies, master of doctoral studies, and it's like I came back. I was writing for journals, for professional linguistic journals, Journal of Pidgin and Korean languages. And it was a non-native speaker that actually critiqued me and put red marks all over it. He says, "Man, this sucks." And I just learned from that, because I'd been trying to actually learn French at the same level as my English, and I was publishing French all the time. And I came back and my English sucked. My written English really sucked. My spoken is no fine. So I learned from that point on to publish in English all the time to keep that level up. And I publish in my other language, like in French and other languages too, in Creole and other. I publish in those at a lower rate just because I need to keep my English up, because that's what the publications are actually going to get most read by, right? But language attrition happens for whatever your language or whatever you're not writing in, reading and writing in all the time. You can speak in it and do it. And actually, the attrition has happened to me in French too, because even though I wrote my master's, my doctoral, theses in French and all that, and did them, for about 5-10 years, mainly wrote in French and published in French for this period of time with a little bit of English. Over the past 30 years, I've actually mainly published in English. Okay, and even at work, when I work in a company, I work in a money-making company. Most of what I write in and do my presentations. The content is written in English, because I'm going to have to write this, or even some of the emails, because I have to work with people from all the world, so I need to make sure that they can understand the first shot. If I need to translate, I'll do with it. So if I make the oral presentation of an English content document, I'll present it in French. Or I can actually probably present part of it in German, but they'd be laughing at me my level. But hey, that's, if I can say enough of it in German, they're happy. They're happy to come in, get the engagement of your audience. But I'll present it in the language I need to present it in, spoken. But I'll write it in English, because that's the one that anybody can. But people want to read; they want pre-reads of this. So I'm not going to do it in a language. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to localize this, okay, culture, and just because I have to bring it back and put it in English again, and I don't want to do that. So I'd just rather start this a written base that I can do it, and I can speak whatever language you want me to speak and do it, present, or have others present it in other languages do you want to. But it's not going to happen that way completely. But so that's kind of some of the reasons why English is where it has its status today. But we'll have to deal with the future and see where we are once the snap of the fingers has happened and half the world disappears, right? So I'm referring to a Marvel movie there. So it's this. We'll see what happens in this century. Will it still be around as the main language, the main lingua franca of the time? Don't know. Time will tell. Time will tell. We'll see where everything navigates for the next under 100 years. If it doesn't stay, I'll be happy, because I think every language gets to have its chance. But it'll just be another dominating language that gets it afterwards. So it'll just be another thing. It won't be usually one of these, lower languages on the language totem pole status. It won't be the ones at the lowest that are going to get up to the top. So it'll just be another dominating language at some point in time. Might be Russian, who knows? So who knows? Japanese, I don't know if the Japanese guy can make it. That was kind of his joke. But there's some of the things. This is just the complexity of language politics, language planning, politics, policy, and then that affects governments and how they do things with education and politics. And that affects then language choice of the individuals and how they want to do it. So don't want to go to a long video about this, because I can, because this is kind of like my background of doing working in this field. So that's my academic background of it, other than the actual translation and practical aspects of making money off it. So, and I have a linguistic cousin. He says, "Yeah, you're the one that profits in this thing." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the one that I help make money for the company to keep its people hired, salaried." So, whereas the academic linguists, they get to do this for research, and whether or not the students are happy about it doesn't matter. It's just that's what they get to do because that's what their job is, to just teach. And then students have to take the courses, and the courses don't really make a difference in the end of what you study, which is for personal whatever research. Whether or not you do that and use it later on in life, that's another thing. So, but in the job, you got to do it. Yeah, that's what it is. Hope it helps, and could have all different thoughts about what these for what it means for the International Mother Tongue Day. That's really important. All of our mother tongues are important. Every single one down to the last of the 7,000s, plus all the alien ones that we haven't learned yet. The movie Arrival is a really good movie. The movie Arrival is a wonderful movie for showing the complexity of this. In other languages, the translation actually comes as First Contact, as in the French and a few other languages, called First Contact if you translate the title. But the movie is called Arrival. Great movie. Great movie. Have a good day.